Welcome to the Family Pictures Podcast. I'm Michael Branson Smith, and I'm here with the
Jim Groom.
The Jim Groom. Yes, you know, we forgot to celebrate our last episode as episode number 50. This is actually episode awesome. 51. Yeah.
51. And we had to miss a week because I was traveling. But yeah. Michael was prepared. He wasn't fucking around. He was like, I'm locked in. Jim, what are you doing? But we're back for maybe one of the greatest movies of all time, Michael? Am I crazy
I
to
think
say
this
that?
is our this reminds me of like 400 Blows and like, wow, we're actually doing a film that is considered like in the canon of films from the 20th century.
So many people, like when you look at top 10 lists amongst the great critics and the great filmmakers, this film often shows up, and there's a reason. It is a masterpiece, but let's talk about it rather than.
And this is Tokyo Story, the 1953 film by Yasujiro Ozu. Ozu is the master Japanese filmmaker that basically is not known in the United States until really the 70s, and then it isn't even appreciated until starting in the 90s. Honestly, from what I was reading, this film, though it came out in 1953. Oh, and by the way, this is our second film in our next series of films that focus on kind of generational conflict, I guess I've called it. And in particular, it's looking at adults managing their older parents. And our first film was Make Way for Tomorrow, the 1937 film by Leo McCarey. And now we're on to the film literally inspired by Make Way for Tomorrow, Yasujiro Ozu's Tokyo Story, which he had never seen Make Way for Tomorrow. It was actually his longtime writing partner, Kogo Noda, that had introduced it to his idea of making yet another Shomengeki. These are Japanese films about everyday life of common people. And that was his obsession, I get a sense. I don't know much about Ozu. How much did you know Ozu, Jim? From your film studies, and have you watched many other films besides Tokyo Story?
He has a series of like cycling through the seasons. This is one of them. Another one is Late Spring, which is amazing. It has those pillow takes that we'll talk about again that are just spectacular.
Pillow talk,
pillow take. We'll get there. What is it? It's pillow shot.
Pillow shot, but still a pillow talk. Jim, do you want to have some pillow talk?
Me and Ozu have done a lot of pillow talk. So I didn't know him as a filmmaker. I knew him more as a pillow talker. But no, I mean, I've only come across Ozu probably in the last 10 years. Seeing Tokyo Story on a recommendation, and I was sold. But then I went and watched a lot of his other things. Another masterpiece I really love is called Late Spring, starring the same actress who plays Nokiro in this film.
Setsuko Hara. Yeah, she's like a Japanese superstar, basically, from that era. She's like a Brigitte Bardot or something like that. She's incredible.
Yeah, she is. I mean, I only came to him recently. And I was super excited when we started talking about this topic, about family dilemmas when it comes to older parents. And this was one of the first films I thought about because it is so, how would you say? It is so pathetic in the relationship of these two old characters, going from house to house and the struggle they have, but yet also somehow very happy and in love, much like we saw in our previous film.
It was one of my favorite things about this too, is like there is this distinct contrast in marriages, right? And how this older couple has this really full relationship. And it's funny because I just rewatched the other day, Matt Damon and Robin Williams, Good Will Hunting, Rain.
Hunting,
and I hadn't watched it since, many, many years ago. And of course, being older and having older kids, I was like much more looking at the film through Robin Williams' character's perspective and his relationship with his dead wife and the whole picadillos thing, like the relationship of an older, long-standing, healthy couple and how each other's crap and you let it pass, because that's what makes a good relationship. Because of course, there's always something that bothers someone in a relationship, right? And then how you manage it as you appreciate that person on such a deep level. That's what I wanted. That was a feature that stood out to me, as you suggest right away
I
too.
mean, just that moment, and we're jumping ahead, but we'll come back and fill in the
Yeah.
details, people. There's a scene where this two old couple, they're basically adrift in Tokyo because their kids are not, not exactly
They've
the
literally
greatest
kicked them
hosts.
out of the house.
Exactly.
They're biding their time in the park.
And I guess maybe it's before this, but it's around this time where the husband says to the wife, I guess we're homeless now. And they both laugh. And that is just for me, such an amazing moment between these two, because they're laughing at the very fact that, their kids just don't want them. And I think that's really at the heart of this whole series that we're doing. That one scene captures it.
No, it really is something that I think we're going to discover, is this idea of, parents reconciling with their children's independence and what that means. Like, there's going to be moments of they literally talk about it. It's like, man, our kids used to be nicer, right? What happened? Like, where did we go wrong? And so anyway, so to go a little, there's not a ton production note wise on this film, but it is interesting. So, Kogo Noda and Uzu basically were longtime writing partners working on dozens of films together. And this was one of 14 he had made between, I think it was 48 and 62. And this is an important moment because this is really post-war Japan, right? Yeah. This is post the Pacific War Japan, right? From the Japanese perspective, and the kind of imposition of a change in society, a new constitution written by Americans, like a westernization of their culture is very much what this film is about as well. And that was really interesting to look at too.
Yeah.
And
I'm sorry to interrupt, but there was literally, like you said, a new constitution in 1948 post-war that essentially changed the entire Japanese economy. And that guy, I think his name is Noretti, that you offered Arthur Noletti Jr. has an article about this, and it's pretty great, right? I mean, just talking about this change in Japan.
Yeah. And so, this is and so it's interesting because even though this is 1953, it made its way to the United States only for the first time in 1964 as a one-off at the Museum of Modern Art with a bunch of other Ozu films. This is from a Turner Classic Movies website, these notes. And then it didn't even get released until 1972. But the funny thing is, that none of that even matters because it's still so limited. And I don't think this film really existed in the culture of critics in the United States and Europe until it basically comes to DVD, right? And in the 90s, and the Roger Ebert review is from 2003. I'm sure he probably saw it beforehand, but it is still crazy, right?
That is crazy.
This is,
But
and so
why was it so hermetically sealed off from the Western audience?
It's not surprising. A freaking, post-World War America, they're not interested in Japanese culture. Can you even imagine? I want to watch a film about Japanese life. And the reality is, it's just as much American life. And that's what's so incredible to me. It's like both cultures at that moment, so Make Way for Tomorrow is a story about, recovering from the Depression, whereas this film, Tokyo Story, is about, the emerging Tokyo economy, but they're both about also urbanization, right? And the displacement of families due to urbanization in part. There's other things, there's many other factors that are in play. And so, but I think I can imagine, Americans were not particularly interested in Japanese culture at all.
Unless it was Godzilla. Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So,
and then it's Perry Mason, basically Americanized version of Godzilla. You're not even seeing the true Japanese Godzilla. They somehow intercut Perry Mason in the middle of it, Raymond Burr.
But to your point, and it's a great point, it really kind of landed this film for me nicely. Some of the things I didn't have. You can see it in shots, right? A lot of the kids have gone to Tokyo. They've left their hometown, right? Yeah. They're all working. They live in these small apartments. Like there is this sense of the hustle and bustle of trying to make it, but the Noletti article really talks about the vision of, where you have the depression, like you said, in Make Way for Tomorrow, you have this industrialization going on in Japan. And he talks specifically about like a new vision of the bourgeois Japanese, right?
Yeah.
That are trying to make it and that are kind of atomizing. And there's more about the individual and the individual's kind of place. And in some ways, this film is, an elegy for what was Japanese family and what's being lost to this new economic kind of grid that's being placed on top of the culture post World War II. I mean, it's a deep film in that regard. It's like a novel.
Yeah, it's looking back, but it also is reconciling with some of the issues with that past, because that past system was a patriarchal system at the same time, right? Yeah. It was a system that basically focused on the firstborn male as the heir, and that heir controlled everything and the patriarch controlled until that firstborn heir took over. And obviously in most cases it was always going to be a young man that would take over, and independence wasn't an option. You were tied to your family, and to leave it was not a possibility. So it is Western ideas of independence, but there is some equality that comes out of this at the same time, that it's not like it's celebrated, because that's where I think the Noriko character is such a conundrum, right? Yeah. Because she's this, in just to frame all the characters here. So there's, the parents are Shukichi and Tomi, the father and mother of their 5 children, one who has died in the war. Shogi, is it Shigo? I can't remember. I'm getting that one wrong. That's the only one I didn't write down. What a dummy. There's a lot of Japanese names, a lot of mispronunciations to come.
Yeah, exactly. Get ready.
And, they're off to Tokyo. That's the start of the film, as they're packing for Tokyo, and they're going to see their eldest children, Koichi and Shige, who are both married, and Koichi, their oldest son, has 2 children, and they're excited to go visit them, and they're going to stop off in Kyoto at some point to see their younger son Kizu, and then finally back in their home where they're going to be leaving from at the start of the film, Onomichi, they're still living with their youngest daughter, Kyoto, which is very common, like that in Japanese culture. Even though she has a job, she's a school teacher, she still lives at home because she's unmarried. And so that's the setting. And what's interesting is to me, the most interesting character in many ways is the Noriko character, who is the daughter-in-law. That's and right. She's single. She has not remarried. And we're going to talk more about her, because I can't quite figure out what Ozu's doing with her. I mean, I think I have some ideas, and I can't wait to hear you talk about her. But she's a very important character, because she's the only child that actually gives a shit about.
She's genuinely happy that they're visiting, and exactly. she takes the time. She's the only one who takes really time out and shows them around Tokyo. And for the rest of the time, they're kind of stuck in various attics or other rooms in Tokyo, and it seems to be blazing hot because everyone has their fans. So
I know they have their fans, and I love how they pull their shirts open and they fan themselves with their shirts open.
And they have a way of fanning that Antonella was commenting on. It's like you do it slowly, and then you speed up at the various pieces. It's like there's a fan, geometry or chemistry or calculus going on there. That's interesting. But
and there's a lot of wardrobe changes too in the middle of the day. Like you go from your outdoor clothes and your pants and your shirt to your you come inside, and then you get into your loose kimono or whatever it is for the indoors, and it's the robe that you wear and wrap up, because it's loose, and it makes sense because it's cooler, right?
Yeah.
You're airing your body out.
So let me say something here quickly, and then you'll get us back on track. I would never make it in Japan. And here's why. Here's why. I can't sit like Indian style, as they used to call it. I don't know what we call it.
They sit on their knees. No, it's not cross-legged. They sit on their knees.
Okay,
it's even harder.
Yeah.
No,
you'd be in pain after a while, right?
Yeah. I'm with you completely. I do not have that flexibility.
Yeah, they all seem
didn't
very limber, and I was like, damn, I don't think I do very well there without
no, there's no
furniture.
furniture to sit on. You're all sitting on the floor.
That's serious. But
So
like,
you're saying we're not built for Japanese culture.
but it's amazing because I have, as a result of this film, I have also fallen in love with the Japanese interiors. You know what I
Mm,
mean? Because you really
yeah.
feel in these people's homes. Like you
Yeah.
feel like embedded in these homes and in their world. And I think it's a good place to start because where it starts really is with the mom and dad, with father and mother actually
Yes.
packing their bag to go to Tokyo.
Yeah, and it leads to right away one of the immediately laugh out loud moments of humor and touching bits of understanding of Tsukichi and Tomi's relationship when Tomi's like, "Where's the air cushion?" And they're both like working on their little bags, and it's so adorable. They each have their one little bag, and that's it. And they kind of take it every way throughout the entire film as they're shipped from place to place. And he's like, "It's there. It's in your bag." He's just like, "No, it's not there." And then moments later, it's like, "Oh, here it is in my bag." It's like, in your bag.
In your bag, eh?
And it's like there's no meanness about it, but
No.
and there's no like, oh, it's a version of like, oh, I'm sorry, I had it, just like, oh, you had it, you dick, but that's this presentation that Ozu does of a couple that's that they've been through it, and this is that idea of the picadillos, like that Robin Williams would describe, and I
Yeah.
love that word, like these small failings of one's personality or presentation of self that would drive an average person crazy if you had to deal with it every day. But because this is your person, they're your picadillos. And I love that. I love it. And there's a bunch of them that happen throughout this film between the two of them. And I love that.
And it's amazing to your point, just how quickly these two, Tomi and Shukichi, become such characters, right? Like they
Yeah.
become so much the moral center of this universe as they move from place to place, and their relationship, you just see more into it about like, as we saw with, Make Way for the Future. Is that
Make
what is
way
it?
for tomorrow. Yeah.
Make Way for Tomorrow. As we saw with that, like this is a love story, right? At a
Yeah,
certain
very much
point,
so.
like
Yep.
this is a love story of these two elderly couple starting to make the rounds to their children and they're almost taking stock of what their children have amounted to, if you will.
Yeah, it's
And
very true.
and it's really it's a tough because this film, as much as it's happy and they're nice and no one's really mean to each other, at least as we might imagine it in contemporary culture.
Well,
There's
or contemporary films will present.
oh, exactly. We're
Yeah.
really seeing like a kind of an honest evaluation of what life has wrought.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, you see like Koyoko, who's the youngest daughter, who's a school teacher, and we see her, it's like, bye, mom, dad, I'm going off to school, going off to work. And they're like, oh, and what's so cool is the way that Chishu Ryu, who plays Shukichi, the father, just his movements of body, it's all so intentionally slow and deliberate and kind and
Yeah.
with smile and patience, and similarly Tomi for the most part too, but he in particular, his movements are so deliberate and careful and kind, and to a fault they endlessly are saying, oh, we don't want to be a burden, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, and that happens, and that leads to very quickly they're in the home of Koichi and Fumiko. They arrive at and the funny thing is, before they even arrive, they're a burden, right? Because Fumiko is getting the house ready, making it look nice as best as she can. It's this small suburban house just outside of Tokyo. which later the parents are going to be like, I didn't expect to be such a long ride from the station. Like they're already putting their digs in, right? Like, gosh, I guess he's not such a successful doctor after all, because that's what he is.
Exactly.
He's a bit of a country doctor. Well, what was that? What was that big fancy college education for if you're just going to be this small town doctor?
Doesn't matter. They all get degrees anyway, Michael. All doctors do. No big deal.
And their older son, Minoru, who's in junior high, is like, "What did you do with my desk, Mom?" Like, God, what's the problem? It's like, I'm making way for your grandparents. It's like, how am I going to study, Mom? And he's awesome. He's such a great bitch.
Yeah, and those two kids are amazing. And there's those scenes, to your point, once the grandparents arrive, and you're right, they're already a nuisance. But once they arrive, those kids, it's an interesting kind of play going on, because the grandparents obviously don't really know these kids at all. And so they're like, "Oh, come here. I'd like to talk to you." And the kids are like, "No." And then they run away. And everybody uncomfortably laughs. And that is and it is so relatable, that uncomfortable laughter in these situations where you don't even know your own family, and time and space and your own kind of being sucked into your own thing has essentially like distanced you from those that have been closest. And that's an ongoing theme in this movie we come back to again and again. But those kids, to your point, really play it out beautifully, because they're like this next generation. And there's a scene where Tomei, later on at this day, before they move on, where the youngest of those two brothers is out playing. And she's basically like asking the kid, but really herself, is like, "What will you be like? Like, will you be like your dad? Will you become a father too? Will I even be alive to see it?"
Yeah.
And it's just like, oh my God, existential Japanese film coming. Get ready, because this is going to get fucking ugly. Oh my God.
Yeah. And Isamu, the younger son, is like, he's just like, "I don't know who the fuck you are. I don't know what to say to you." It's really, really, really sad.
It is sad.
And so, but back to their entrance, we're introduced also to Shige, the oldest daughter, and man, she's Korra in a nutshell. She's like, and this is one of the things. And so, parents visiting, this is something I think we should talk about. Like, I think I sadly am a Shige or a Korra. I am like, deeply uncomfortable with the changes in life, and I think that's what so much of these characters represent. They're really tart with their parents. Like, Shige right away is making fun of her mom's weight, like, "Oh, you've gained a lot of weight. I haven't seen you." It's like,
"Remember you broke that chair?"
It's like really, really nasty. And she's like talking later as, their parents are upstairs changing and they're talking about dinner. And she's like, "Oh, don't get this sashimi. They don't need that. That's too nice a dinner," and she's constantly talking about money. And, and I've seen this in my father-in-law and his wife is like always talking about money, and you're just like, how much things cost. And it's like, dude, let's just enjoy each other's presence. But that's the thing, it's not possible. And that's the conundrum of parents and older adults, and how they disrupt lives, and you're just not able to do it well. And you wish you could. You really wish you could.
Yeah, and that's really, like you were saying this earlier. One of the scenes that it's like many of these scenes, nothing's happening in this movie, right? Like, it's one of those great movies. It's almost European in that. Like, nothing is happening in these movies and these scenes. But I want to get the name right. The father and the mother, so Shukichi and Tomi, go upstairs at at the brother's house, who's the doctor, the country doctor, at their son's house, the country doctor.
Koichi, yeah.
And so they are like setting up their beds to go to sleep. And, as they're setting up their beds uncomfortably, there's that sense, and they say nothing and they're just there. But the movie gives you this deep sense of what it means to be a stranger in your own family's
Yeah.
house, right? Like
Right.
to
Yeah.
kind of be there and be uncomfortable and know that downstairs they're probably talking about you, like, oh shit, here they are. Now we have to take them tomorrow. Like, are you going to be around to take them? I'm not going to be around to take them. And let's do
Yeah.
this. And those two parents already feel it, like you said, before they even arrive. They know they're a burden, and they communicate that endlessly to their kids. Like, I am so
Right.
sorry to be a burden to you. I really think we should go back back home now. You know, we've done our Tokyo trip, and the kids kind of feel bad, so they're like, no, 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 stay, parents. But it's just the way in which this is so universal in its
Hmm.
discussion about what it means to be at your family's house or to be dealing
Yeah.
with family, and what it means to take that 5 minutes, to your point, away from your life to enjoy, this kind of, imposter, or no, imposter is the wrong word. Like this kind of new presence,
Imposition.
yeah, imposition,
Yeah.
exactly, in your
Yeah.
world. And this film really does that well, to show you like how fucking selfish we are.
And how, I mean, it goes both ways. Like you think about visiting your parents' house and you're like, where do I put my stuff? And and as you're an adult, you're like, gosh, I know. I mean, it's because if you happen to be in a home that happened to be the one you grew up in, and it's like, and you go back to your own room, and that's like the most awkward thing on the planet as an adult, revisiting your childhood room and staying in it. And you're like, well, it doesn't have my posters anymore, thank God, because that would be really weird. But at the same time, it's not my room anymore. But it is. But in this situation, it's the older parents visiting the kids' places, and it is hard. And like I think about, not to be the core of the shige, like my version is I like to cook, and of course grandparents love to cook, and the way that they just suddenly take over your kitchen and they're putting stuff all over the place, and you're like, and they're asking you, where's this, where's that, and it's like, it's a fucking kitchen, just find it. Anyway,
You should go to a Tommy.
yeah. Yeah. Yes. Tommy's the spa that they finally push their parents out of their houses to. It's like, it'll be a treat for you. And so, yeah, one of the things that also stands out really quickly is that as part of the tale of urbanization is the contrasts of the marriages in terms of the relationship. So we've already spoken a bit about Tsukichi and Tomi's relationship being this like kind of loving relationship. But in contrast, we have Koichi and Fumiko who live in their house with their two kids, but it's also where the doctor's office is. And then same thing with Shige and her husband, Karazo. They live in a building that's their home, but also her business of
Yeah.
her beautician, like beauty salon. And so of course, the relationships aren't just loving family relationships or caring for kids. They're business relationships. They're business partners. And this is represented again and again. There's a moment where, Koichi is going to be forced to like give up the family walk that they were going to make. And because there's a patient, literally, and that's the crazy thing is like, a person from the outside of their home can just open the front door, which is a sliding door, a traditional Japanese sliding door, but it's on a bell. So it goes ding, 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 ding. So they announce themselves like, hey, I'm in your house, but I'm actually here for doctor's business. And I just think about, and as part of this, there's a patient who's, got a fever. And so Koichi goes to Fumiko. It's like, did you not sterilize that equipment well enough? And it's like, he's blaming her, and it's really, really interesting of like, of course, this is, we're in this together as a business, and this is how we live. So you're responsible too. And it's not just a relationship built on family.
That's a really
And
good.
it's such a contrast.
That's a good observation, and he says it to her later when they come back. Is like, get me that bandage as they're reading the telegram. But it's right. It's like she's his wife / nurse assistant, and there's a really strange piece to that. But the other thing that's so interesting that I was trying to get my head around is, like, no one in Japan at this moment seems to have any time. It's like, we can't take the walk today, so we're going to have to wait till next Sunday to do anything. It's like
Right.
everything seems so scheduled and so impossible to fit anything else in. And, by next Sunday, they're already moving on to the next child's house. And so there is this real sense that the parents have just been stowed away in the apartment while everyone else is working, or in the house while everyone else is working. And, there's that sense of, that work ethic of like, there is no time. There was a point where Noriko was saying like, yes, we used to work during our busy season. We worked every day, even Sundays. And luckily I can take a day off today. But there's a sense also, and the way Ozo does it is always like this. It's indirect slant about just like with this new industrialization came a completely probably different way of working and of a kind of being tied to a job and to a lifestyle to get what you want. And I don't know, I can't prove it because I don't know what it was like pre-World War II, but there does seem to be a sense of like no one has any time to do anything.
No, I mean, I think that's I mean, and that sustains to this day, does it not? Like where you have to if you're going to make time, you have to be so intentional about it. You have to schedule everything, and that's the industrial society. It's not rural like agrarian life where you're just together as a family, and you are sharing labor, obviously, as well in a lot of ways, because the work is the home itself, right?
Yeah.
And that's the classic agrarian society is like the home is the work, the family is all part of it, and so you're all together in it together, and that's like I think we kind of saw so much of that in the series that we did where it was the frontier families, right?
Yeah.
Like that was the labor of the home. And so an industrialized world and in a new where you're so focused on the nuclear family, who has time for the extended family? Never mind aunts and uncles, right? Like forget about that. Imagine if you have you have so many brothers and sisters, like it's so hard to make time for all of them and see them all. And like, you're just like, wow, I can't believe this person's my sibling. You know what I mean?
That's a really good point. And it's like I had 45 cousins. And like
Yeah.
I didn't know any of my cousins really as a result. You know what I mean? There were just too many. I mean, with 7 brothers and sisters and then 45 cousins, it's like even my family, they could have just as well been strangers.
Yeah.
And so it's an interesting thing to think about that. And that the article by Norletti, I think, ties this back to industrialization, right? Like the atomization of the family. It's all about getting ahead. It's all about trying to get into that lower middle class and kind of sustain it. And, it was interesting to see that and how both, Make Way for Tomorrow and Tokyo Story were deeply about, the economic switches or challenges of the moment, even if they're going in 2 separate ways. One's a depression and one's, ironically, the birth of a new Japan and the Japan that pans out for all sorts of economic reasons. I mean, they become giants in the economic world over the next 40 or 50 years from here. But like, what's the cost of that?
Yeah, on the family structure, absolutely. And so much of that comes out, and I think it's worth going through many of the moments to keep fleshing out in contrast to Noriko, because we haven't gotten to Noriko's character much yet, and she's a really important contrast to what's going on. So, when as you described, like they move on to Shige and Karazo's beauty salon / home. And
probably
Shige
the least
just,
warm home in the entire.
Oh, exactly. It's very much like Cora and poor like Barkley, like being stuck on the couch, and Make Way for Tomorrow. She is just all business. And that's another contrast I talk about that's going to come up with Noriko. It's like all of like Koichi and Shige's talk of their parents. There's no simple like, how are you doing? What's it like back in Onomichi? Are you still talking to your neighbors? Like they try, but it's not really there. Instead, it all just moves to logistics, like you've already described. What are we going to do with them? Can you take them? I can't take them. Oh, we were going to do a walk, but now we can't do the walk. What should we do? Whereas, and so Shige it's even tougher. She's like, her husband comes back from whatever, a walk or some work. You get a sense he's like bill collector or something. I'm not.
Yeah,
exactly
that's right.
sure
I have to collect some bills. He says.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, and he's like, oh, I bought your parents some nice cakes. And she's like, cakes? They don't need nice cakes. They're happy with crackers. And you're just like, damn, that is harsh, Shige. Come on.
Shige is rough, man.
Yeah, it's like they don't deserve a cake, and they eat them immediately. Like she's like, they're far too good, and she wolfs them down along with her husband. She's like, oh, he's like, okay, I guess they're not getting cake. Too good for them.
No cake for you, mom and dad.
Yeah, and it is like, and to his credit, he does make some time. Corazzo takes them to the baths. And then at the same time, Shige kind of calls up Noriko, like, and so Noriko, who is again we've described, is the daughter-in-law, the widow to Shogi, who has died in the war, or who was technically missing in action and presumed dead. And Noriko gladly says, "Sure, I'll do that." And she, in contrast, she also is at Koichi's home in the opening scenes when they first arrive in Tokyo. And when she comes in, she goes upstairs and she's like, how are you doing? In stark contrast to the rest of her family. So what's your impression of Noriko? Because I have a lot of thoughts, but I want to hear what you think first.
I love Noriko. I mean, I really feel like, obviously, she's the daughter-in-law. So there is, again, not fully understanding, how those familial ties work in Japan. In America, that would be a little bit less. Your son's missing in action, essentially, declared dead. You would think that she had less of an attachment to the parents than the two other kids who were in Tokyo. But it's quite the contrary. She seems, we've said it already, happy to see them. She's the only one you see asking to take off work to actually go, and there's a Bridgestone tire in that scene, which is such an interesting moment of industrialization and globalization. That Bridgestone tire makes me laugh. But she actually asked for the time off, and then she takes them around Japan, or Tokyo, and shows them the city and spends time with them. And they're asking each other, like, where do you live? Where do they live? And she's kind of, in some ways, their orientation, their compass. And it turns out at the end of the film, she's the one, if you're going to have a George from the previous film, you were my favorite son.
The favorite son.
It seems like Noriko is the favorite of these two because she actually, to your point, has taken time to essentially, be with them, spend time with them and care about them. And it's not like she's saying anything crazy. She's just there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and making space for them, right? And that's the difference, right? Instead of putting them in a corner, she makes space for them. One of my favorite parts of that, at the end of their tour, she has them back in her apartment. It's in a modest apartment, and she goes to her neighbor and she's like, "Hey, you got some sake? I want to, give them." And they're like, and then she comes right back. It's like, "Oh, I need cups too." And she's like, "Cool, sure. I've just watched them." And it's that classic.
It's when she comes back. It's when you notice that baby is in a little bit of a
dome,
weird dome. I'm like, I didn't even see the baby the first time.
But that's the healthy side of city culture that you and I both experience, where it has this community unto itself because you are living so tightly together, and it's showing that oh, we're in this, it's tight and small, let's share things, and it has this communal feel to it. And she's allowing Shukichi and Tomi to be part of that, and they're really enjoying it. And and he's like, "Ooh, sake." We learned that Shukichi drank a little bit too much in his younger days, and he's like, "Yeah, I'll have some sake."
So into that sake. And to your point earlier about how intentional and slow he is with his. I mean, to watch him drink a glass of sake or smoke a cigarette is, I want to smoke. I want to drink sake. This guy is into it.
Yeah. He is deeply appreciated and savoring every bit of it. It's so true. And so she plays a good host.
She's
and it's so important that she does this. And there's this moment. So, but after this, they're immediately the older brother and sister are like, oh God, now Noriko did a great job with them. What do we do now? And so they try to send them off to this hot springs, and to a moment they're like fine with this. Oh, it's so beautiful. They're by the sea, but it turns out to be a young person's place.
Yeah, it's like a
And
spring break.
yeah, and at night it's like a huge freaking party, and they can't sleep at all until the next day. There's this wonderful the shot that's behind our images is here is their next morning, and they're hanging out together, and he's like, so at least you slept some. He's like, no, I didn't sleep a wink. He's like, well, you snored.
Exactly.
It's this classic, another
So
Picadillos moment where they're just finding the humor in each other and appreciating their relationship, honestly. And so they're like, let's just go home. And they actually mean home. They actually mean let's go to Onomichi. Like, they clearly don't want us here, but they're like, but we can't go now. And so they go back to Shige's, and she's like, what the hell are you doing here?
Like, I should have been more explicit. You weren't to come back for several days. I have this big beautician meeting going on, right?
Yeah, you can't stay. And they're like, okay.
Yeah. And that's when they say the homeless thing. It looks like
Yeah.
we're homeless after she
Yeah.
kicks them out.
She literally kicks them out, and she literally, to her client, her beautician client, she's like, I don't know who they are.
Right.
They're like,
Country
rejects
people.
it. Yeah.
That's right. And this is actually an interesting moment too, because this is the moment, obviously, when Make Way for Tomorrow and Tokyo Story truly overlap in that,
Yeah.
there's always there's the kind of relationship to, the themes of getting old and kids and their lack of appreciation, but also not demonizing them. But here's the moment when the parents are actually separated, where they have to go separate ways because literally Shige is not letting them stay at the house.
Nope.
And Noriko does not have enough room for both of them. So we're in a very similar situation than we were in Make Way Tomorrow. And I was like, wow, this was the moment where I was like, yep, they've obviously been playing with that theme, but here they're actually like calling it out.
Yeah. And so what happens is it leads to two of the most important scenes in the film, is where Tomi goes to Noriko's house and spends the night, and Shukichi goes out with his old friends. And boy, he goes out hard. He finds the retired police chief. He finds an old, partiers in there. They just get rip-roaring drunk.
Oh, I love it.
And they start harassing a barmaid and talking about how much their kids suck. And it's really funny.
It's so rough.
And it reminds me of kind of like Barkley and Ruben complaining about their kids in the store. It's like, my kids are this, your kids are that. And it's really great because initially we hear from Shukichi's friend, like, oh yeah, the retired police chief, his son's doing super well. He's like the head of some company now. And he's like, oh, in Shukichi's way, like super slow to absorb, like just taking that in. But once they're drunk enough and it's late enough, we hear from the police chief, no, that's bullshit. He's actually not doing well. I lie to people so they don't feel bad about me. He barely wants me there, but at least he doesn't want to kill me, which is a literal line in the film. And
that whole he doesn't want to kill me is interesting because in that article by Norletti, there's this suggestion that it's both, you would read it like, oh my God, he's being so sarcastic. Like, his kid, the only thing he wouldn't want to do, he wouldn't kill him, thank God. But in fact, that was like almost a way of them saying, he's in some ways a good kid, right? Like he's actually that's a way of them jokingly saying like, actually he's a good kid. And I think that struggle in this scene is understanding, to what degree they're really completely disappointed with their children or not. Because you can really literally read it like, gosh, they all feel like their children are a failure and that as a result, their lives are failures. And, there's this dark kind of sensibility. They're all drunk, leaning on the bar, as if anything has meant anything at all. Or, are they just drunk and this is a moment where they're, obviously talking with each other and sharing it, but like they struggle with this idea and it's clear and it's not black or white, like where they are with this relationship to the sense of expectation they talk about with their children.
Right.
And maybe we expected too much. And there's an interesting thing because it kind of takes it back onto the parents. Like, what were the parents' role in kind of assuming what those kids need to be? And then what was Tokyo's role? Because Tokyo was too big, as they both say. And it's just such a complex scene in all its simplicity, right?
Right. Just men being men, drinking too much, and needing alcohol to actually open up and talk to one another, rather than just exchanging old drinking stories. And it takes literally like 30 shots of sake before you start talking about something meaningful. And I appreciate so much Ozu's perspective on that. Like, he recognizes this is how this would go down, in stark contrast to Noriko and Tomi's conversation, which is happening at the same time. And so Noriko is again playing the perfect host. They're just chatting away, and Tomi opens up and says, "I really, really want you to know that I know my son was imperfect. He was a drinker too." Right. And and it's been 8 years, and I want you to remarry. I want you to be happy. And because she equates, family or having a relationship and children with happiness, which is totally understandable. And the way that Noriko pushes back against this is so interesting. And there's this thing about there was one comment by Chishu Ryo, who plays the dad, the actor who did like a dozen films with Ozu, and how particular he was with this particular film. Like, he's like, to him, the script was perfect, and all he had the entire film in his head, and we had to do was just perform it exactly and not make mistakes, his words. And this idea is that the whole reason I bring this up is Noriko's character, the way that she's presented, is she's always smiling. Like, full face smile, in contrast to all the other characters. Every single other character shows expressions of like dismay or lack of sympathy. She's insistently smiling through everything she says, and I have to believe that means it's a charade. You know what I mean? Like a bit of a charade. It's an imposition. Though when I first read it and I'm listening to this scene with Tomi, she's like, "No, I'm very happy." And it's really interesting because ironically, she's the one that's been the most attentive child, right, to her parents-in-law. And so you're like, maybe she is totally happy. Maybe she is fine. She is her independence. She represents that ideal of independence that Nicoletti was talking about in that article, like this idea. And that's what he references this quote from a random article about this idea of people wishing to be free. And that's what we named this episode.
Yeah.
So, but am I wrong? I mean, is that because there is the ending speech, and I don't want to jump ahead to it because this kind of conversation happens again. But how did you read their conversation, and how do you read like Noriko's lifestyle?
I think Noriko is really like an enigma, because at this point I'm struggling the same thing with like, is she really happy? Is she happy with the way things have turned out? Her husband has been missing in action for 8 years. She's in this dingy apartment. She has a kind of not a great, seemingly, desk job. Like, it doesn't seem like her life is great, right? But at the same time, she has that, mask on. She's smiling. She's suggesting that, why are you so worried about me? I'm the only one that's happy. I'm the only one that's taking time off to be with you. Like, I'm actually, of all of the kids you have, I'm probably the most attentive and responsive. Why are you more worried about me? You should be telling that to them. They're the ones who are miserable. And so it's tricky because she doesn't seem miserable.
No.
I mean, and I don't know what her relationship is with the. I really like the way they do it because they slowly introduce you to the fact that her husband's their son and that her
Yeah.
husband's missing in action and that, he was a drinker, but she even misses those days now. And that's that weird moment. She says, I even miss those times when he would bring his buddies home from the bar late. And and they keep on saying he must have really you don't know how bad the husband was and what he did because they keep on insisting how bad he was. And she doesn't deny it,
No.
but nor does she focus on it. And so she's a complete enigma. I don't know what to make of her, but the last scene does shed more light on it. But at this point, I'm having the same questions as you.
Oh, okay, good. Because speaking of bringing home some drunk buddies,
That's the best.
it seems like Shukichi is like, I guess I don't have a place to stay because he stays out too late with the chief. He must have had one because his other friend, he's clearly done. There's a great moment where the friend who was supposed to stay with that night, he is so done. He literally has his head on the bar and he's like, no more, stop. Don't make me drink anymore.
And it's interesting why he can't stay with him. He can't stay with him because he has a letter. So he's letting out the upstairs room to this playboy who plays pinball rather than goes to college. And they all joke because that poor idiotic parent who thinks he's going to college, they're kind of laughing. That's why he knows he's not going to be able to stay there. But then he gets so bombed that, we get to our final scene. Because that's what I'm thinking the whole scene is where is he going to be able to stay?
Yeah, so Shige and her husband are fast asleep in the beauty salon / home. And there's a knock in the middle of the night from the police, no doubt, and saying hey, are these two yours? And it's her dad and the police chief who immediately flop into two of the beauty chairs and start passing out. And Shige just goes on a tear and starts complaining he's drinking again. I can't believe it. He had stopped once Kyoto was born and now he's drinking again. Meanwhile, it's man, that's a pretty good run. Kyoto was probably born 25 years ago. She seems it's come on, cut him some slack. 25 years of sober and he's doing this the first time with his old friend.
He's not a bad drunk. It's not like he's beating up anybody.
No, he totally isn't. He's just passing out. And it's so great because it also reminds me of the Cora scene. And I think that Nicoletti piece pointed this out, where it's this suddenly payback moment, right? It's I'm finally going to be an imposition on you no matter what you want. It doesn't matter. It's I'm too drunk for you to do anything otherwise. And Cora similarly has to deal with her father, Barkley, when he's sick and the doctor has to visit. So she has to put him in their bed instead of having him sleep on the couch so she can seem like a good daughter, even though she's not. And he gets back at her so bad by revealing this to the doctor and not being, compliant at all. And there's so much humor in that. And there's so much humor in this scene too, where she's pawing at his back and pulling his hat off, Shige is, and why are you this way? And he's I'm too drunk to care, man. I don't know.
Exactly. And the stranger and the police chief is yelling things randomly. I just thought it was hysterical. And then they're figuring out what do we do? They're too drunk to take them upstairs. Yeah. And her and the husband are puzzling it out, and she's saying the whole time, what a bother. They've been such a bother. I am so done with this. And you can really relate to that. As much as Shige's not the best character in this film, you can relate to her being
totally.
I am so done with having to entertain these people. They just have to leave,
Yeah, and they finally do. And this is towards the the ending of this film, and it's so interesting because so little is showcased, because Tomi is sick, and this is revealed through Kizu, who finally appears in the film. He's the younger son who lives in Kyoto, and he's at work. And it's this really important scene. He's oh, what a bother. He's just like his older brother and sister back in Tokyo. It's she was sick. I had to get the doctor twice. And his friend's dude, they're your parents, man. You should, maybe, while they're alive, be a better son. Isn't there a saying about that or something?
Be good to them now, please.
Yeah. And he's And meanwhile, this is a really important scene because we finally get this real heart to heart between Shukichi and Tomi about their kids and the way they talk about their children, and they start saying things like slow, and it's so calm and simple, and
Yeah.
they're not yelling, they're not like emotional, and they're never emotional in the film at all, except for one moment where Shukichi has to manage what his life is going to become. Um, but they're like, gosh, Koichi used to be nicer, And then Tomi's like, yeah, or no, it's and she's like, Shige too, and they're like, yeah, but they're like, well, they're better than average though, aren't they? Yeah, and they're like, yeah, we're lucky. And this is this really interesting conversation about like, is this our fault? Like,
Yeah.
did we make our kids become this? And this is
This
something that parents
is
have to deal with all the time, right?
this is so. I feel this scene so deeply because, like, when anything goes wrong with our kids and shit has gone wrong with our kids, Antonella immediately pulls that because I'm like, it's their fault. Like, I don't have anything. Like, I never. She starts like, what have we done wrong? And it's like, sit down and go through the list of things me and her have done wrong on our 23-year adventure together. And I'm like, this is the worst. Because she like fully believes that, we are. Whereas I'm like, that's just their fault. Like, I don't want to take responsibility for anything. And it shows you the difference between us. But like, I really feel this when they start kind of suggesting like, is this us? Like, what have we done wrong? Like, and then like also like how much of your own value as a person now hinges on your kids as you get older.
Yeah.
Right. And you see that also with the police chief, but like there's all of this stuff. And I'm thinking about my kids now. I'm like, oh, Jesus, they better start stepping it up if I'm going to be able to brag about them. Right. Like they got some work to do.
Yeah, I mean, it makes me think so much of, we've mentioned this in the past about being parents of younger children and how you get in these shotgun relationships with other parents, and because you're around their other kids, because it's you're not allowed to leave your kids alone. But then the one part we haven't talked about is how this always leads to discussion with your partner or your wife about like, man, what's up with that kid? And you're like, what are their parents? And this idea.
And then you start blaming the parents immediately.
Exactly. Immediately. So whether or not you believe, Antonella, what Antonella's saying, well, your neighbors are saying like it's your fault.
But there was Doris Lessing had this book called The Fifth Child. And this book is basically, it tries to, I mean, it does a lot of different things, but one of the things it suggests is this fifth child was just born evil and was just born mean. And I have known some fifth childs in my life growing up, some kids who came from a good family, who you seemingly on the outside had everything, and they had just become monsters. And so I wonder if there's also that, like, there's always this kind of, what if one just gets away? Or what if one it wasn't all about setting up the perfect situation and then letting that kid thrive. Like, I mean, that's the horror, right? For a parent is the other side. Like Fifth Child is really a horror story because it's like, no matter what you imagined, you could control.
Every serial killer's got parents, right?
But that's funny because the first thing people do when they think of a serial killer is they're like, what was their home life like? So immediately they go to that. Like, what, and it's usually horrific. To be fair, it's usually absolutely horrific. Yeah. But, what happens when we get to the serial killer when it's not?
No,
like,
I mean,
just normal.
Yeah, and to like kind of
quote unquote
put a button on that. One of my favorite things that I always talk about, it's like, so that kid is behaving a certain way, and you're like, oh, it's the parents' fucking fault, right? But the funny thing is, as you're describing, at a certain point, it's the kid's fault, right? Even though we're talking about Shukichi and Tomi talking about, is it our fault? But they're adults now, right? And at a certain point, they're their own person, they're their own responsibility. And so much of this film is about like this idea. It's like, and that's, I think, where the end scene really comes to this, But this idea of like children grow away because they come to become their own people, right? They're going to have
Yeah.
their own ideas of what life matters, and their pressures are not your pressures, and those pressures frame them as much as your pressures on them when they were under your household frame them. But now those pressures are gone, even though they might feel them, especially, and they get awkwardly back in your life when your parents visit or you visit them. It's like, wait, those pressures are supposed to be out of my life now. I don't want to deal with that stuff. I dealt with that. Like, I'm out of there, right?
Exactly. Well, I mean, I had a moment. I mean, I've had many, but what we're thinking about,
Jim, are you having a moment?
I'm having a moment. What we're thinking about, and I don't know if this is related, but bear with me. I used to, my kids were younger, there was a bus stop when we were in Fredericksburg before we came here that I would take them up. And there were other kids at the bus stop. And Antonella usually did this. I did this sometimes. I wasn't as reliable as her, to be fair. So there was a kid there who was kind of fun, and she was like a tomboy, and she was kind of cool. And I used to play this game with her where you put your hands on top and she had her hands below, and then you move your hands. And if it doesn't, you slap the hand. So I was playing this with this girl who was like 8 or 9, and I was slapping her hand. And I finally looked at her hands, and her dad was there and was like, "What happened to your hands? Why are they all red?" And I'm like,
oh, Jim Groom fucked up.
That's the point where it's it truly is the parent. I was playing it seriously and nailing her on the hands. I still feel bad about this. And the dad was like, "What the fuck? Are you hitting my daughter's hands?" And I was like, no. We were playing a game. And he was like, Pentagon military. He was like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's probably stupid." So there's the point where, in fact, the parent can be stupider than the kid. And maybe the kid, avoids the problems of the family, of the parent, which I hope my kids do, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, that's the cliche of the overzealous parent yelling at the ref. It's like, "What you doing, ref? Let the kids play. What are you doing with my daughter out there on the field?" That it's effectively that, you're taking certain things too seriously, not seeing the context of children as children and not full-fledged adults that have your emotions. They're just like, "I just want to fucking play." And to credit, this girl just wants to play this game that seems fun, and it is fun, and she doesn't care if her hands are a little red.
I am glad you have my side on this, because I felt really bad when the dad pointed out, these glowing red hands that I had been slapping repeatedly, playing this game with an 8-year-old. Kind of, maybe I should have been a little bit more thoughtful, Michael.
A little more thoughtful, but it's okay. I mean, but to close out here, we have an interesting, big contrast. So poor, Bark and Lucy are basically separated at the end of the film forever by distance. But in Tokyo's story, Tomi gets sick and dies.
Yeah.
And this forces the children to finally make the visit. And there's this, Shige being Shige, so it's like, "I guess we gotta go." And then she's chiding everybody. It's like, "Make sure you bring your morning clothes," because she's dying at first. And she's like, "Make sure you bring your morning clothes, because you might as well be practical about this. She's probably going to die. She's going to die. She's going to die." That's what it feels like. That's she.
Yeah.
And as soon as she dies, she does die. She's like to Noriko and the youngest daughter, Koyoko, did you bring your morning clothes? Come on. Didn't you know? You should have known. Bring your morning clothes.
Exactly.
My fucking mom just died. Shut up.
Yeah, that was hard. And then also after the mom dies, "Hey, I want this and this keepsake. And, I want this." And there was that whole moment where Shige was just collecting the things she wanted. And the other daughter was like, "What's up with her?" Yeah,
Koyoko's not having it. And she's young. And so, but as she's dying, this is when Shukichi is finally like, oh, this is it. He said, so he literally says, "So this is the end." And this is when for the only moment he breaks, and he comes out of it very quickly in a weird way. And because he's emotionally kind of stable human being, unlike he's worried about his kids so much, because he knows they're not. right? And he sees the anger and disappointment. That's, you know, even though they're talking, one of the ways you might look at that is like, even though they're saying they're nicer, they're in a funny way saying we're concerned about them. Like we wish they were
Yeah.
happier. You know, they see their kids are under tremendous pressure. That's another way you might read that conversation. And so for Shukichi in this moment when, you know, his son is saying like, this isn't good, Dad, she's going to die, because he's a doctor, you know, and he's like, holy shit, like this is the end. So this is the end. And that's when he breaks for this moment. And then there's the funeral, and Kizo hadn't shown up in time, but he makes it to so he's like feels remorseful. And then they go to this dinner, and this is where, you know, Shige, as you described, was asking for the clothes, and you know, it starts nice enough. They're remembering good times, and they're remembering their mother, and a few things that they speak fondly of. But then it quickly goes back to logistics, right? Like, oh, I got to get the train. Oh, I got a baseball game to go to. I got a business report to do. I got patients to see. And life just to them just moves on. And Noriko, being Noriko, hangs out, and she hangs out with Koyoto. And Koyoko, who's just so young still, is just like, what the fuck, man?
Yeah.
My siblings suck. They're so selfish, you know, and this is bullshit. And this is the next morning after the dinner, and they've left. And, you know, Noriko's like, don't be too harsh. She's still in her smiling phase. Like, is it a mask? And we're about to be revealed. Is it really a mask? Because I'm still not completely sure. Because she's like, children have to grow up, and like you don't see it yet. And then, but in being like a teenager, almost, Koyoko's like, man, life sucks. She's like, that's so disappointing, you know.
Life is disappointing. Right?
Yeah, and Noriko's like, yeah, it fucking is. Like, yeah, it is. I mean, they don't swear in Japan.
No, they don't. No swears.
But no. But this does lead to, you know, the second conversation, and it's the important one with Noriko. And as you described already, Shukichi is basically opening up, you know, putting aside like formality, as you would imagine. Or again, you've already well described. We don't know Japanese culture very well, but other writers that we read in preparation for this talked about like this is him kind of breaking formality to like really reveal his true feelings about her, and saying, you were the best that we had, as you've already said, and like saying to her, like, Tomi has told me, and I want you to know, like, her favorite time was that night she spent with you in Tokyo. Like, and to thank her, he gives her his wife's watch that is like this keepsake that is given, not asked for or taken, like Shige does. And he also insists, like, you should remarry. And this is where she finally, the mask breaks. And I'm not sure, and this is, again, I want your opinion about, like, how do you interpret how she calls herself selfish, how she says she finally admits to being lonely.
Yeah, I mean, I was interested, you know, because here's the first point where she's basically saying, I don't always think about, you know, your son, and I don't, like, all these things you're putting on me, they're not true. And, you know, she almost feels like her sadness is like, I can never live up to your expectation. But there's a great moment where the father turns around and says, it's not that, it's not about that. It's just about the fact that you're honest, right? And this idea that you're present and, like, you know, you're living an, like, what you get the sense, like, this authentic life. You know, if Ozu's trying to frame out, you know, the horrors of this new model versus, you know, trying to keep this authenticity within it, I think Noriko represents that. And she's even given hope with this watch as she's, you know, moving away at the end. You know, when you hear the clock ticking and you see her on the train, and it's as if she has, you know, a kind of piece of him or a piece of her and a piece of that old way, and of trying to preserve, you know, some of that sense of who they were as they go barreling into this new reality of culture. You know, she in some ways is that kind of bridge between these two moments, between these two cultures as it's in a shift. And I think, you know, she's not perfect and she does break there, but I don't think it suggests, I mean, I think she becomes more than just a character at that point.
Yeah.
She becomes a symbol, right? And she becomes the symbol of the film, if you will.
Yeah. And I think, like, her clutching the watch on her train ride home is that like symbolic moment, but it's meant to be real. Like maybe Noriko is going to change. Like she will get married now, or maybe she will seek deeper relationships beyond the ones that she has with her neighbors and or in her office. We don't know what they are. They're so the glimpses are so brief, but she is this attentive human being, as you suggest, and that he sees that in her and says she should share that. He's basically saying you have something to share, even though you don't think so of yourself in that moment. And then the film basically ends on the love story, which very much like Make Way for Tomorrow does, and it's poetic and it's sad at the same time. Like Make Way for Tomorrow is so fun because they like say "fuck you" to their kids, and they're like, "We're not coming for the final dinner," and they relive their moment, and they're appreciated as human beings as they go relive their honeymoon, if you will, in a sense. But this is not that. He no longer has a wife; she's passed away, and his neighbor pops by as he's sitting there by himself looking out, and she's like, you're going to be lonely now. What are you going to do? And he's like, well, if I knew it was going to turn out this way, I think I would have been nicer to her, huh? Yeah. And it's like a joke, but at the same time, it's very poetic. And I don't know. I just find that he's like, yeah, days will be long now, but he's truly, and I think Ozu was saying, it's like, I did have a good life, and it's like, my kids are my kids, whether they're coming back anytime soon, I don't know, but I had her, and she was mine, and I was hers, and that's what matters, and that's that similar ending and value that, this idea of it is about these two people and this adventure that they go on and having children, and I think this is something that we feel really closely with, too,
Yeah, and I agree with you. And partially what's interesting is as I finished watching the film on Criterion, there's a whole bunch of interviews with various people about the film. And I saw that they had an interview with Marlon James, who's a Jamaican writer who wrote The History of Seven Killings, which is like the history of the murder of most famous reggae singer in the world.
Oh, Bob Marley.
Bob Marley. It's a really great novel if you ever get a chance to read it. But he's talking about this, and he's like, I had no idea that some Japanese guy had so much to tell me about my relationship with my Jamaican grandparents. And I just love that idea that, like, this movie really has this kind of universal, like, kind of message and relationship, like you think with the great literature or the great films. Like, I think that's why it's considered such a classic. Like, as much as it's very particular about Japanese culture, and there's a lot about this movie that I probably did not even get as a result of that, but it's so also easy to relate to on this universal scale. And the other thing that Marlon James said that I thought was really funny is like, I think this is the only movie I ever cried where nothing happened. I love that because, like, I was like, that last scene, as much as you're really seeing it as hopeful, and like his wife has passed, but like they had a good life, and you could easily see it like the young daughter does, as life is so disappointing. And the children are disappointing. And like with, Shige says about about the mother, the life goes so fast and it's gone. And so, like, you could spin this movie either way. It could be deeply life affirming, and this two were in love and they were great, or it could be like the darkest of dark movies where nothing happens.
Yeah. Or Make Way for Tomorrow. I want a happy ending. He's like, nope. And I mean, but to the point of like how much the universality is, like, I think we haven't talked this much about our own familiar situations in the context of film in quite a while. Like, and I think it speaks to that universality too, I think, which is really, really cool.
It is cool. No, it's great. Great film. I'm so glad we did this one.
Yep. That's another one in the book. Thanks so much.
Rock, not rot.